grim is what Mr. Dua is suggesting, Mr. Bhattacharya. Would you see it in the same light? And what does India do to brace for this kind of a problem?
Well, I won't disagree with Mr. Dua at all on his perspective on what is happening in the global scenario. The US is probably seeing the end of its recent times longest economic boom from 2008 onwards. The recovery started, and it has been growing quite well. And probably 2019 will be the last year of growth. And a lot of people are actually estimating that probably recession may hit the economy even earlier than the end of 2019. Yeah. USA will also be going in for an election at the end of 2019. So US is having its problem. China is having its probably a really serious concern is slowdown. Let us not underestimate the impact the Chinese slowdown will have on the global economy, as Mr. Dua rightly pointed out. Brexit, Germany. I'm really worried about Germany, actually, because if Germany actually slows down, then is the biggest hit to the European economies is well-being. So given this scenario, I think the message for a country like India is very clear, that this is the time not to splurge your resources and lose the two big advantages that you had in the last 5 years. One is a modicum of fiscal consolidation, which you started off from 2014. Gradually, at least the centrist fiscal deficit was being brought down and has been kept under check by and large. And the second is you have kept a tight leash on inflation. Now, the danger would be that in one's bid for gaining the good vibes from the electorate and trying to win the voters' sympathies, the government cannot loosen its purse beyond a point wherein the government's fisc is once again under attack, and that will have a dangerous impact and a very, very negative impact on the economic growth prospects. Right. So, and particularly because the global trade is not picking up. Right. With the trade war going. So therefore, if you don't, our trade is actually doing very badly. In a sense, our exports have just had a 0.6% growth last month. Your imports have fallen. So on trade side, there is no recovery from India. So therefore, is a cause for concern for overall economic growth. So if you need to sustain your growth and keep your public finances in good shape, you need to be very, very careful about the way you are spending money from the exchequer. All right. So that's the message. And my worry is also is caused by what the RBI governor has recently stated, that probably a time has come where RBI must also look at growth. Very good. Growth is important, but I think equally important is inflation and financial stability. So therefore, in our bid to achieve growth at a time where every economy is seeing some headwinds, we should not depart from the practice of fiscal consolidation and financial stability. All right. Abhinav Prakash,
that having been said, is this an opportunity for India, or should India also look inwards like some of the other Western countries are doing?
Yeah. While these oil prices and other things are important, what we are seeing fundamentally in the world is the realignment of the economic power. The economic power is shifting from the Western Europe and America towards China and India. Atlantic is no longer the world theater, it's Indo-Pacific. And this is leading to a backlash, as we were talking before, because the Western world has an aging population, the economic dynamism is low, they're unable to compete in the world, and there is this is the first generation in the Western Europe and America which is not better off than the previous generation. So what we are going to see is the closing of the world trade, and the barriers are going to be erected. That said, I do not think the situation is so bad, because see, we have just implemented GST and we have just created one of the largest market in the world. So we also have an internal market which is one of the largest in the world, which has a huge potential if exploited properly. And I think as the logistic costs go down in India and you have the ease of business going up, I think it's a good focus of Indian policy that you have to stimulate the internal trade to counter the falling exports, as we were talking about. Also, this is an opportunity as well. We can definitely grab the low-hanging fruits. because the Western countries and the companies are shifting away from China. They're looking for safe havens. But the problem is that they're shifting to the Indonesia, Malaysia, and Bangladesh again, not coming to India because of two reasons. Number one is the logistic costs are very high. Number two, there's a policy uncertainty in India. The opposition is trying to drag us again to the back to the 70s and 80s, the socialist rhetoric, which does not inspire confidence among the companies and the investors in India. And number three is that we have failed in the last, I'd say 30, 40 years to integrate ourselves into the world supply chains. See, most of the world trade is now intra-firm trade. It's not between the consumers and the final producers, it is between the companies to companies. Which means that investment is also equally important as the trade policy. And our investment environment remains poor because the greenfield investment in India are not really trickling in. We have to focus on stimulating investment, trying to grab whatever opportunity we get, especially the where the China is vacating its place, and try to focus on stimulating our internal trade. We have just implemented a major policy reform.
Right. You know, how must, closing comments from all my guests now, so I'm going to ask you to be brief. I've got 5 minutes left on the program, starting first with you, Mr. Dua. How must India adapt to the changing times? Clearly, there is a vacuum that is being left behind as US and China withdraw, like Abhinav Prakash has just pointed out. Can we fill that vacuum?
There is absolutely no option but for us to try and fill it up. The question is, have we succeeded so far? Because the vacuum is, I would say, last 12 months also we've had virtually that opportunity. The GST is, I would count it as a blessing, something which is a very positive feature which has happened, which should encourage people to come in here, invest in India. But if you look at the FDI inflow of last year, for which data has not, official data has not been released for the first time in last 8 months. Otherwise, DIPP itself used to release it every 3 months, which does give cause for concern. That is it something like unemployment data or employment data is not coming out, and that's number one issue. But more important is the political uncertainty now, that what kind of a government are we going to be having post the elections, is making people, at least the foreign investors, I would agree with Abhinav, holding back commitments for fresh investment. Though at Vibrant Summit, probably thousands of MOUs have been signed and almost $1 trillion of commitment has been talked about, etc. Is not going to materialize immediately.
Sure.
We have to be hoping that as of now, wherever the trade war between China and the US is offering opportunities, can we fill it up?
Right.
I think we are trying to do it in agriculture products like soya, which the Chinese import in a big way, and it's not coming from the US. So,
right. So the opportunities are all there.
Opportunities are there, but we have to be able to turn these into permanent advantages, not mere windows of being able to just fill the short-term gap.
Sure. Mr. Bhattacharya, what's the best way forward?
Best way forward is not to forget the importance of investing in building infrastructure, spending enough adequately on building your healthcare facilities, educational institutions. So these are your social infrastructure. On the other hand, you have the economic infrastructure of roads, ports and bridges, airports. So you cannot relax on building your infrastructure, both economic and social. And at the same time, don't go in for free giveaways. And if you have to bring in a universal basic income to win the farmers or the voters, then make sure that the universal basic income comes along with the phase out of the host of subsidies that go in the name of providing support to the poor. So universal basic income is a good idea, but it will be a disastrous idea if it comes along with many other subsidies that continue to be doled out to the people in this country. So therefore, we need to be mindful of all these issues going forward as we get into a very, very tricky and uncertain situation, because after all, elections can become uncertain.
Sure.
I'm saying this, Once you start universal basic income, I totally agree with what's been said. It will be very difficult to withdraw that.
Yeah.
It will then become over and above the
What
host
you-
of
the
subsidies.
existing schemes
Yes,
that you already
and that
have,
we
right.
can ill afford.
Okay.
Yeah.
Abhinav Prakash, close the show for us with your concluding
Well,
remarks.
I think the government should continue with the reform agenda it has been implementing, and especially one of the biggest achievement of this government is the fiscal discipline. Despite the lots of other welfare schemes, it should try to resist the temptation in this election year to basically overspend. And also because, as we are seeing that lots of these uncertainties are being caused because of the fourth industrial revolution, we really have to start rethinking our education sector. Our workforce is young, is dynamic, but is not equipped with the proper skills and education to compete and adopt to the new realities. We have to really start rethinking our basic education from the primary to the secondary to the higher education. This is the main focus on which I would like government to focus upon.
Absolutely. I think that's a very good start. I mean, if you can start there,
Yeah.
everything else will fall into place,
Fall
if
into
not
the place.
immediately, maybe in the near future.
All this job crisis is basically the people are not really able to fulfill the roles they're required to.
Absolutely.
So there's a mismatch between the supply and the demand
Yeah.
in the industry.
All right, skill development is something that we should focus on in the near future. Infrastructure as well is what the panelists are suggesting. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it from me. See you again next time.